Be sure to give the video a thumbs up, share your insights in the comments, and subscribe to keep up with our newest narratives. That night took me by surprise, altering my perspective in ways I never anticipated. The journey of my profession, the decisions I've made, and notably the individual I collaborated with for more than 10 years. Yet, there are instances that catch you off guard, revealing themselves like a masterfully orchestrated melody, each tone resonating profoundly within your soul. It began like any other evening. The annual gala of the company had just concluded, and the city lights sparkled through the expansive glass windows of the rooftop venue. The chuckles of my coworkers lingered in my mind as I ventured outside, breathing in the crisp night air, thankful for a moment of solitude away from the clamor. The slight pinch of my heels served as a reminder of the long hours I had spent standing and smiling. As I was about to leave, I glanced back at him, James Carter, the man who had been my boss for the last 12 years. With silver at the temples and a sharp dress sense, he carried himself with the assuredness of someone who had crafted his success from the very foundation. At 61, he maintained his usual composure and control, yet there was an unmistakable shift in his expression that evening. I stepped outside for a breath of fresh air, responding with a faint smile. What an extraordinary celebration that was. He moved next to me, hands buried in his pockets, his typical commanding presence gently illuminated by the warm glow of the street lights. It was indeed. To be frank, these events don't quite resonate with me. I let out a soft laugh. Humorous. You guide them through each passing year. It's simply business, he remarked, tilting his head slightly in my direction. Unlike others, you appeared to genuinely relish the experience. I merely shrugged. I guess I've mastered the role. He chuckled softly, and for a brief moment, we lingered in a pleasant stillness. The city buzzed with life, yet in that fleeting moment, it was merely the two of us, shoulder to shoulder, distanced from the rigid conventions of the workplace. Then arrived the words I had not anticipated. He confessed that he wasn't quite prepared to head home just yet. Would you like to accompany me for a drink? I paused. It was quite common for us to converse beyond work hours, engaging in late-night discussions and strategy sessions that extended into the night. Yet, this seemed distinct. His tone held an unspoken quality that sent a slight thrill through me, quickening my pulse just a bit. Absolutely. At last, I spoke up. Why not indeed? We strolled down the street, leaving behind the dazzling towers of downtown and venturing into a more tranquil part of the city. He guided me into a cozy lounge, where the lighting was dim and soft jazz floated gently through the air. The atmosphere was one of eternal serenity, a sanctuary shielded from the frenetic pace of the outside world. As we nestled into a cozy corner booth, he relaxed his tie, a rare sight that caught my attention. He gazed at me, truly gazed at me, as though perceiving me from an entirely fresh perspective. You've been with the company for quite some time, he remarked, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. Over a decade. I acknowledged with a nod. Have you ever contemplated how life could have unfolded had you taken an alternate route? His inquiry took me by surprise. Are you inquiring whether I have any regrets about my decisions? He shook his head in disbelief. No regrets. Simply a matter of curiosity. Have you ever contemplated the paths left unexplored? I let out a slow breath. It seems that everyone experiences this at one time or another. Yet, I have always held the conviction that each choice, each path we follow, guides us precisely to our destined place. He smiled at that thought. That's a thoughtful perspective. We engaged in a deep conversation, truly connecting for the first time in years. It's not focused on tasks, not on timelines or performance reviews, but on the essence of living. He recounted his formative years, the challenges of establishing the business, and the sacrifices that accompanied the journey. I revealed fragments of my being, the aspirations I once nurtured, the experiences that molded me. Time became indistinct. One drink led to another, and soon there were three. In that moment, as we shared memories and laughter, the atmosphere around us transformed. He extended his hand across the table, fingertips lightly brushing the back of my hand, tentative, exploring. I remained steadfast. A fleeting instant, a breath held in anticipation, where all possibilities teetered on the edge of uncertainty. And then, softly, he confessed, "I've never shared this before, but I've always held you in high regard, more than just for your craft. Your presence has a remarkable ability to anchor the world, providing a sense of stability amidst the surrounding chaos." My heart raced slightly. I had received my fair share of praise, yet this one resonated in a way that was uniquely profound. It was not mere flattery. It was an essence, a profound truth. "You've always been the unwavering presence," he continued. Perhaps I took longer than necessary to understand the true significance of that. I hesitated, uncertain of how to reply. He was more than just my superior. He was someone I had held in high regard for years, a person whose perspective I had cherished more than I was willing to acknowledge. And yet, as I sat there, enveloped in the cozy glow of that softly illuminated lounge, my mind drifted far from thoughts of work or the demands of professionalism. I found myself contemplating the way he gazed at me, as though he were finally perceiving a woman he had previously kept hidden from his own view. "I should probably head home," I finally admitted, though my tone betrayed my uncertainty. He observed me intently for a prolonged moment, then gave a nod of acknowledgement. "I would be happy to guide you." The streets had grown hushed, the city embracing its late-night cadence. Upon arriving at my building, we paused at the entrance. He expressed his gratitude for the evening, for the attentive ear. A smile graced my lips. "The sentiment is mutual, I could express that to you as well." A moment of stillness, a flicker of uncertainty. And then, before I could hesitate, I leaned in, just a bit, just enough. In that instant, everything else fell away, reducing existence to just two souls intertwined, with the echoes of yesterday and the whispers of tomorrow dissolving into the pure essence of the present. Yet, just as the moment was about to unfold, I hesitated, my breath faltering. "Good night, James," I murmured, crossing the threshold before I could surrender to the depths of my emotions. With the door shutting softly behind me, I leaned against it, my heart racing wildly. A change had occurred in our dynamic. And deep within me, I understood that this was merely the start. The following morning, I rose earlier than normal, my thoughts still entwined with the happenings of the night before. The way James gazed at me, the heat of his hand resting on mine, the silent words lingering in the air between us. For years, I viewed him solely as my superior, a figure of power, admiration, and separation. Yet, I found myself unable to shake thoughts of him, James, the man who had lowered his defenses, who had shared his feelings with a gentle honesty, who had gazed at me in a manner that sent my heart racing. I shook my head, attempting to dispel the swirling thoughts as I poured my morning coffee. This was absurd. Nothing occurred. No events could unfold. As I stepped into the office, an unusual, persistent tension enveloped me, as though the very atmosphere had shifted. I glimpsed him through the pane of his office. He was engaged in a call, yet for the briefest instant, his gaze lifted and connected with mine. A moment of stillness. A moment of uncertainty. He offered me the faintest smile, a subtle gesture meant solely for my eyes. It surged within me, a subtle tempest waiting to break free. The day unfolded in a haze of discussions and correspondence, yet my thoughts wandered endlessly. It was even more distracting that James appeared unusually attentive, lingering at my desk more than needed, locking eyes with me for just a moment too long. As the afternoon wore on, a sense of restlessness began to settle in. I craved the crispness of the outdoors, a breath of clarity for my racing mind. As I emerged onto the modest office terrace, I breathed in the refreshing autumn air. The urban landscape thrummed beneath, a harmonious blend of far-off beeps and conversations. Engrossed in my musings, I failed to notice the door creak open behind me. "It seems you've been steering clear of me." James' voice carried a serene quality, yet it held a subtle sharpness beneath the surface. I pivoted, managing a soft laugh. "Steering clear of you? That seems rather theatrical." He moved in closer, hands buried in his pockets, wearing that same enigmatic look on his face. "Could it be?" I let out a deep breath, massaging my temples. "James, last evening." It was unlike anything else, he completed it for me. I understand. I gazed up at him, the man I had collaborated with for countless years, and yet in this instant, he seemed like a stranger. Perhaps, for the very first time, I was perceiving him with clarity. I whispered, "We can't do this," but the words rang empty as they left my lips. He regarded me intently for a prolonged moment, then let out a breath. "I understand your thoughts. This poses a significant risk. It alters the situation." "It certainly alters the situation," I stated with conviction. "James, you hold the position of my superior. Guidelines and anticipations exist." "I don't care about rules," he interrupted, his voice low yet unwavering. I gazed at him intently. This was not the poised, methodical individual I recognized. This was another individual. For a change, a person who wasn't preoccupied with commerce, authority, or obligations. He had me on his mind. "You're making this more complicated than it needs to be," he continued, his tone gentler now. "Last night, we transcended the roles of boss and employee. We were merely two individuals. I believe we both sensed it, that undeniable connection." I took a deep breath. "That doesn't imply it's correct." He inclined his head, his eyes probing into mine. "And still, you haven't expressed that you don't experience it as well." I parted my lips, yet silence enveloped me. The truth lingered between us, palpable and unfiltered. I sensed something. A sensation I hadn't experienced in ages. He edged nearer, his voice a mere murmur. "If you think I'm mistaken, I'll let it go. Last night will fade from my memory." I had the desire to. I longed to speak the words, to distance myself, to feign that everything could return to its former state. However, I did not. I was uncertain about my desire to proceed. The atmosphere around us shimmered, an unseen force drawing us nearer. My breath caught in my throat as he extended his hand, his fingertips lightly grazing my wrist. A query, not an obligation. For the first time in years, I found myself not wanting to think. I remained steadfast. James' fingertips lightly brushed against the inside of my wrist, yet the sensation reverberated throughout my entire being. My heart raced, the heat of his hand igniting a subtle tremor within me. For years, I had existed within the confines of expectations, those imposed on me, my profession, and my stage in life. I had constructed a life centered on certainty and logic. Yet, as I stood there, with James gazing at me as if I were a revelation, I sensed the walls begin to shift. He lingered, observing for any indication that my desire matched his own. And in that instant, I took action. I exhaled gently. "James, I'm uncertain about the direction this takes." He offered a faint smile. "I don't either. However, that doesn't imply we should flee from it." A gentle wind whispered across the terrace, sending a shiver down my spine. He observed right away, removing his suit jacket and placing it gently over my shoulders. His aroma, subtly spiced cologne, evoked a sense of warmth and familiarity, enveloping me. "Let's go," he said, gesturing toward the office door. "It's time to leave this place." I paused. "Are you referring to the present moment?" "Why not indeed?" His voice carried a lightness, yet beneath it lay a subtle resolve, quietly steadfast. I cast a fleeting look back through the glass doors. The office buzzed with the vibrant energy of the day's end, as individuals navigated the familiar rhythms of their routines. Returning inside, I could already envision the unfolding of the evening. I would collect my belongings, return home, prepare dinner, and spend time in solitude with my reflections, acting as if everything remained the same. Yet, a shift had occurred. For the first time in ages, I felt a strong desire to seize an opportunity without hesitation. "Very well," I replied, my tone more composed than I had anticipated. "Let us proceed." We found ourselves in a serene, softly illuminated eatery just a short stroll away, the sort of venue where the melodies were gentle and the servers communicated in whispers. James ordered a bottle of wine, and with the first sip warming my throat, I could feel the tension begin to melt away. With a deliberate motion, I placed my glass on the table and inquired, "What precisely is our purpose here?" He reclined, observing me with that same enigmatic look he consistently wore in the office. Yet this evening, an additional presence lingered in the air. To be frank. He swirled his wine, observing how the rich crimson liquid danced in the light. "I longed for a place with you where we could be our true selves." I gulped. "Imagine." He locked his gaze with mine. That final evening held no significance. The words settled between us, weighty and undeniable. I parted my lips, seeking the perfect words to express myself. For once, I felt a desire to throw caution to the wind. I preferred not to dissect each word before it escaped my mouth. I let out a breath. Indeed, it did. A brief glimmer of emotion crossed his features. Perhaps a sense of relief, or perhaps something more profound. We engaged in conversation for hours following that moment. It's not focused on tasks or obligations, it's centered on our connection. I shared with him truths I hadn't voiced in ages. How I had dedicated so much time to prioritizing my career. How I had persuaded myself that love, passion, and connection were meant for others. Individuals in their youth. Individuals who possessed an abundance of time at their disposal. James paid attention, truly paid attention. As silence enveloped the moment, he leaned over the table, his fingers grazing mine in a gesture both understated and intentional, leaving me momentarily breathless. "He assured you that you're not alone in that." I placed my trust in him. As we departed from the restaurant, the city had settled into a serene hush. The streets shimmered under the gentle amber glow of the streetlights, while the distant murmur of traffic broke the stillness that enveloped us. We strolled for a time, both reluctant to utter our farewells just yet. At the crosswalk, he paused and glanced back at me. "I don't want to rush this," he said gently. "However, I also refuse to act as if this is insignificant." My heart raced, "James." He let out a soft laugh, shaking his head slightly. "I understand, it's intricate." I released a soft, airy chuckle. "That's putting it mildly." We lingered for a moment, the city bustling around us, yet it felt as if we were the only two souls in existence. In that moment, instinct took over. I moved closer, unburdened by thought or hesitation. James' breath caught, his gaze probing into mine. And then, at last, I allowed myself to truly experience my emotions. The kiss unfolded slowly, with a hint of hesitation, reminiscent of the initial notes of a melody that was still unfamiliar to both of us. His hand gently cupped the side of my face, his touch tender and full of respect. As we finally separated, his forehead gently touched mine. "This alters the entire landscape, wouldn't you agree?" I murmured. "Indeed," he whispered. "Perhaps that's not as unfavorable as it seems." I shut my eyes, allowing the warmth of the moment to envelop me. Perhaps, just perhaps, he was correct. The following morning, I awoke to a tumult of feelings churning within me. Anticipation, apprehension, ambiguity. The recollection of the previous night remained on my lips, infused with the warmth of James' touch, in the way he gazed at me as if I were something truly worth the wait. Yet, as the morning sun poured through my bedroom window, the grip of reality began to seep back in. I remained under his employment. He remained my superior. And we had traversed a boundary that could never be reversed. The soft vibration of my phone interrupted the stillness on the nightstand. "James. Good morning. I trust there are no regrets." A subtle smile tugged at the corners of my mouth as I responded with my fingers dancing across the keys. "Myself. None. Me." He replied without hesitation. "James. Not one at all. May I have the pleasure of your company later?" I paused, contemplating my next move. Not that I lacked the desire. I did, but I was uncertain about what the future held for us. Is it possible for us to thrive beyond the confines of the office? Beyond the carefully outlined paths we had adhered to for such an extended period? I inhaled deeply. Myself. Absolutely, but let's have a conversation first. That evening, we gathered at a serene park just beyond the city limits, removed from the clamor and the watchful gaze of the workplace. James stood there, poised against the bench, his hands tucked casually into his pockets as I approached. As I drew near, he lifted his gaze, and his expression was more tender than I had ever witnessed. "Greetings," he remarked. "Hey," I replied, sitting beside him. For a brief moment, we lingered in silence, observing the warm glow of the setting sun as it danced through the branches of the trees. Then I began to express my thoughts. "James, I must find out. What are the next steps from this point?" He let out a breath, as though he had been anticipating the question all along. He acknowledged that he didn't possess all the answers. "However, I am clear about what I wish to avoid. I wish for last night to remain a part of our reality, not something we choose to ignore." I nodded with deliberation. "I feel the same way." He pivoted in my direction. "Let's focus on the essence rather than constraints or anticipations. Let's focus on our journey together, in whatever form that may take." I gulped. "And what about work?" He let out a gentle laugh. "This won't impact your professional journey. You've put in so much effort for that. Should the need arise, we will engage in a discussion regarding boundaries in the workplace. However, I am reluctant to let go of what we have due to logistical issues." His words resonated profoundly within me. For an extended period, I allowed my apprehension of what lies ahead to prevent me from embracing risks, from experiencing emotions I convinced myself were beyond my age. Yet there was James, standing next to me, ready to unravel it together. I extended my hand toward him. "All right," I replied, my tone unwavering. "Let's explore the possibilities ahead." His smile radiated a sense of undeniable relief. As he drew me into a gentle, lingering kiss beneath the dimming glow of the evening, a realization washed over me. This was a night that transformed into something truly memorable. A fresh start unfolded before us.